Welcome, everyone. My name is Raina Spassova van Houst, and this is Hail the Queen, a podcast about authenticity, happiness, and pursuing your dreams. If you're new to the podcast, I am very happy you're here. And if you have been here before, if you've listened to other of our episodes, then I'm happy you're back and that you're enjoying Hail the Queen. My guest today is Adélie Williams. Adélie is a jewel creator. She is also an author. And when I think of her, there's like that word fearless with big lights and like fearless. And as you would hear in my conversation with Adélie, she isn't really fearless. She has her fears, and she uses her fears as a tool. Share a little bit more about that later, and you hear her expand even more on that. But what I mean by fearless, it is actually one of the reasons why I wanted to have Adélie on the podcast, because I met her a couple of months ago, and I was so fascinated by the fact that during the pandemic, when everyone was afraid about their business, about their work, and rightly so, Adélie moved from Ireland to France. She is now on the move from France to Sweden. She quit her full time job. She started her own business. She published 2 books, which she is now rewriting. And she recently also launched her jewelry line. I guess that's why the word fearless comes to my mind, because she keeps moving. She keeps moving and doesn't allow fear to hold her back. I feel like adding something here, because fear is right. One of the subjects of one of the reasons for this podcast is pursuing our dreams, right? Being authentic, happiness. And when we talk about these 3 things, fear is rarely a reason why we don't pursue our dreams. It's rarely a reason why we are not authentic, why we're not true to ourselves. And that's why I took the liberty of writing an article, behind the scenes article, related to my conversation with Adélie, which is really about that thing of not being afraid. I'm not afraid, and I'm not pursuing I don't do what I want to do. So I hope you'll take a moment, it's a short article, a few minutes, to click on the link in the description of this episode and read my behind the scenes article. Now, going back to my conversation with Adélie, the conversation is titled "There is a Link Between Everything." And Adélie and I talked about fear, we talked about poetry, and we talked about connections and links. And as you listen to this conversation, you will notice how they're all connected, how everything is connected. And that's one of the things which Adélie, she says is her superpower, seeing the connection between everything. And I kind of agree with that. Before I leave you to enjoy my conversation with Adélie, I would like to share with you 2 quotes from what Adélie said during our conversation. And I'll start with how she defines one of the definitions she gave of poetry. And I find that it's very important, because I personally, what was it, the left brain person. So I also like my logic and reasoning. I've never been good with poetry. I also thought for a bigger part of my life that I'm not a creative person, yet here I am, a writer, a podcast host, a coach, things that require a lot of creativity. So poetry, going back to the conversation, poetry is seeing what has been given to you instead of what has been taken away. That's how Adélie defines poetry, or explains poetry. And then my favorite quote from this conversation. Here we go. Sometimes when I'm afraid, I just let it be. I accept the fear as a wisdom or a wise teacher. When you feel fear, it's an indication. It triggers something. It's an opportunity to get to know yourself better and deeper. Once you know yourself really well, people don't have that much power over you. Fear is a tool to get there. I really love that. And this seems like a wonderful moment for me to say, enjoy my conversation with Adélie Williams. Hey, and welcome to my new guest today. That's you, actually, Adélie. Welcome to
Hi
Healthy
guys,
Queen.
thank you for having me.
I know you're very busy. We were just talking before we started this conversation. And before we dive into all the exciting things you're doing, I actually want to talk a little bit about how we actually met, which was in or during a course called Marketing Without Social Media. And something that I've been wondering about since we last spoke with you, I was really impressed with all the things you're doing, all the changes that you're, undergoing in your life. And, I personally decided to take time off social media beginning of January. And I'm very curious to hear what your experience is with social media, why this course, Marketing Without Social Media, and when you're, without giving too many things away, but launching new things, doing new things, don't you feel like you should be on social media instead of without it?
That's a very good question. Actually, it's a double factor that I could mention. The first one being that there is so much going on already. I need some balance, and I can't always be connected. I can't always be outward in the world, always connecting with people. I'm very much into a creation mode at the moment. So I've actually put on Instagram that I'm taking a 3 months alchemical retreat, which means for me a creation retreat where I'm just alchemicalizing, or alchemy, I don't know if this is the right word, but just transforming things and creating things on a quite a big scale, for me at least. And I can't be everywhere. That's first of all a question of just timing and time for myself and time for everything. So it's mostly about planning, but also just a well-being, because being everywhere nonstop just creates, just drains you. There is no moment when you can, recharge and resource. So it's a big partly for this. So I started my retreat on this a month ago, I think now. I don't know, maybe no less, not less. I'm very bad with dates, guys, very bad. It is so I think it's about 2 weeks ago, I guess, or 3, and I don't miss it. I'm still using Facebook, but on a personal level. I've actually on that point, I've deleted my previous account on Facebook that I used to have for over a decade. I just felt like deleting it, starting from scratch, having a new one, personal one for now, with just a small group of people, and just release everything that was linked to this Facebook, all the images, all the photos, all the pages I created to this account. So this was a huge shedding skin moment for me to delete this account, which I did today, actually. Just I knew it would happen soon, and it happened today, this morning. So I deleted it. I already created my new Facebook account. I'm rarely on Facebook anyways. I don't really use Snapchat. I don't use Twitter. So basically for me, having a social media break essentially means off Instagram for a few weeks or months, which is salvation for me, because I don't know, I just felt like Instagram wasn't feeding. It was like a one-way street relationship. I didn't feel it became meaningless at some stage. And right now I needed to be present to create something real and concrete that I could present to people after, once I come back. So, and I started a YouTube channel in the meantime. So, it's just, I think it's not just a break of social media. I think it's just me realizing that Instagram might not be my platform. I think my platform may just be YouTube and Facebook groups. Simple as that.
And something that I'm wondering is, when you decided to take your retreat from Instagram mostly, how did that feel? Were you excited? Were you like, oh my God, I'm not sure?
Well, I was excited because I'm not a person that tends to be afraid too easily. And when I am, I use it as a fuel, not a breaking point. So I wasn't afraid. I knew I was sure of my decision. And the moment I released myself from this, being tethered nonstop to Instagram, even though I wasn't overwhelmed. I mean, it's not like I have 100,000 followers, but just deleting the app, putting my account on, pause, at least for me. I mean, people can still have access to it. I just won't be connected to it for the coming while. And actually, I felt good. I felt like I was having some space. And this is where everything started to come together on my side. This is where the jewel thing became bigger. This is when I got the inspirations for the next jewels. It just created space that I needed to actually create things in life. Because Instagram, I felt, was sort of keeping me from this action, in real life. Somehow, even though I wasn't always on Instagram, I wasn't an Instagram addict, somehow it was taking some brain space, mind space. I don't know, it was just, draining. It was draining 70% of my energy without any reason and without any results. So to me, it was kind of a logical choice to make and just, choose to be off the stage for now, or at least Instagram stage, and just be here in my life, creating stuff that I love, and then come back potentially and straight to the world on Instagram. But, that's not only Instagram in the game. So I think I might be more focusing in the future on YouTube and having this more direct way to connect with a potential community.
And you already hinted at one of the things you were doing. So now follows the question, perhaps with the question I should have started with, but tell us a little bit about all the beautiful things you're doing.
Thank you. Okay, so everyone, my name is Adélie Williams, and I have two hats right now. So it all started for me in 2020 when I was in the middle of the lockdown pandemic. You all went through the same thing. And to me, I realized that all I wanted to do was write books. So I started to collect. I'm bilingual. I'm French, and I speak English since I was very little, thanks to my mom. That's another story. That's in the book, actually. And I don't have it with me because I'm re-editing it now. So I don't want to show you the old versions. I would have loved to show you the new versions. But during the lockdown, I wrote and collected 2 different volumes of text. So one in French, one in English. The one in English is called Poetic Pilgrimage, because I'm very much connected to poetry and pilgrimage and alchemy. These are my favorite things. So Poetic Pilgrimage. And so basically the line with this book, books actually, is to provide some peace and quiet to the reader. And by me opening my soul, because there are personal texts, poems, and very, introspection and journey type of, context and text. My goal is, by me opening my soul to you, it will do something for you as well. It will open yours and it will take you on a very sweet journey. And I want this book to be something, like a guidance book, something that you have on your bedside table. And sometimes you open it, at random, like you would put a card from a deck, or something, and receive a message. So you can read it in one row, or you can just keep it open, keep it within reach. I've actually designed it to be pretty small. It's an A5 format, so it's not too big. I can actually put it into a big enough purse or backpack, and there are no page numbers, so this way your mind cannot bypass your intuition, because you cannot be like, okay, so on this page there was this text, so I'm going to connect the person to this text, which is okay, but I wanted the reader to experience something else. So no page numbers, you have to let go of that. And also I've added some symbols to really anchor the reading experience. They were designed by a friend of mine to my demand. I was like, okay, so I'm collecting those texts and I'm doing this book, and I would like some symbols, sigils to illustrate this book. And so she did 11 of them, and I love it. And actually I turned them into bookmarks. And if you have all the bookmarks, you can use them as some kind of oracles, because they all come with the symbol and the sentence that goes with the symbol when they were created. So that's for my first book. I call them Kateb, and they're like two faces of one coin. So you have Poetic Pilgrimage, which is in English, and then on the French side, you have Pause Alchimique, which is alchemical break, I guess. That would be the translation. So I'm waiting to receive the new editions of those with a hardcover and a different cover. So this has kept me a little bit busy. Before that, I had wrote a PDF on sacred sexuality, which is also another of my favorite things. It's, sacred sexuality. We could have a podcast on that as well if you like. I'd love to talk about it. And little by little, life happened, and I met someone, a jewel maker, that was connected to everything that I also love, which is Kabbalah, which is the Jewish mysticism. In a very short, that's a huge shortcut, but basically Kabbalah is related to a lot of things, and it's something that's always been fascinating me. And he's teaching me right now about the Kabbalah. He's teaching me also about Hebrew, music, and he somehow became some kind of a mentor for me. He's like my Obi-Wan Kenobi in a way, based in south of France. And so first I went to him to order a bracelet. That, I don't know how you call it in English, I'm not sure, but the snake that bites its tail, and it's the cycle of life and death. So in French, it's the Ouroboros, but I don't know how to pronounce it in English, but basically it's a very ancient symbol. And I ordered it as a bracelet. And when I did, something weird happened, and I already felt it around my wrists. And when I was going to sleep that night, I fell asleep with this sentence in my head, being like, go back in the pyramid, go back in the pyramid, go back in the pyramid. I don't know why it happened. I don't know. I never know why things happen. I usually just link everything together. But in the moment, I was like, okay, so that's interesting. And what I did is that I sent a voice message to his partner for the business, which it's a woman that I've met also later on. And they were both very interesting people that I really get along well with. And so when I said this, she was like, okay, so you really have to meet Patrick, which is the jewel maker behind the scenes. So she's the one handling all the social media and the PR and everything. And he's the one that has, like 40 years of experience, a huge network with big names in it. And so we connected so well that I was like, okay, maybe we, just as a trial run, we could have my logo turned into a jewel. And that's how it started. And I love the experience so much. And it's something that I really enjoy, because to me, jewels allow even more poetry in people's life. And that's kind of my mission, I feel, is to bring poetry into people's life through any way I can find that resonates with me. So it could be through poems, through my books. I'm currently writing my next novel as well, which will be in French. I'll have it translated later, not by me. I hate translating my stuff because I'm bilingual, and it's like a waste of time to me. It's like, I know what I wrote, I don't need to translate it. Plus, I'm not the best at translating, if you want my opinion, because I never really had to translate in my life. So I'm just going to give it to someone. Anyway, over. So if I just recap everything that I do, I'm basically a jewel maker. Well, not maker, I'm a jewel creator, designer, and an author. Well, there you go. Voila.
Voila. Well, you're obviously a very creative person. And earlier you said something, if I remember it correctly, and if I wrote it down correctly, it's that you're not easily afraid. You're not afraid easily, and you use your fear as fuel. So tell me, as I think about it, in order to be creative, to unleash that creativity within, but there cannot be fear in you. Or is that true, actually, that to be creative there shouldn't be fear?
I'm not sure it's a definite recipe. It's just the way I function naturally, is that even when I am scared, I just see it as a sign, a road sign, that's something that I could follow through, and that's something that could be, that could be birthed out of this fear. And that's why I'm always about alchemy and everything, is because I always sort of transform and transmute darkness into light. That's a permanent thing that I do and always done. So I'm not saying people shouldn't be scared. I'm not saying fear is something bad that you should run away from. It's the opposite. It's the literal opposite of that. Fear can be a friend. Fear can be, well, in all proportions, because, for example, if you are a woman walking down the street in a very shady town, very late, then yes, you should probably be scared, because this is survival instincts, and this is definitely a good thing. So that's a good example. But for example, for instance, not to repeat myself, for my journey, I decided to leave Ireland to launch all of this, because I couldn't stay in Ireland having a 9-to-5 job with a very expensive rent. And, just, I don't know, everything was just so obvious that I had to, sort of sacrifice my life in Ireland that I've built. And I have a lot of anecdotes about my life in Ireland and how it happened and everything. But anyway, I had to sacrifice something that I loved to go towards something that I love even more, and that fits me even more, even further. So doing this, that meant there was a certain amount of fear, because I was jumping into the unknown. I had to go back to my dad's place for a little while. I didn't want to go back to France for a long time either, because I don't identify with the country. So for me, it's a step in between. I never launched, I never designed a jewel before this one. And yet I am starting the business. It's not about being fearless. I think being fearless is not something that is too healthy. I think it's okay. It's a good thing to feel the fear, acknowledge it, but don't give it too much credit, depending on the context. Because if I was afraid, I would have stayed to my 9-to-5 job. I never would have started writing a book. I never would have published it. I never would have get off social media. I never would have deleted my Facebook account that I've had for over a decade. There's so many things I wouldn't have done, I think fear can be a beautiful bouquet handed to you if you know how to weave fear, and if that makes sense.
It does. And I have more questions for you on the subject, because that was one of the things that I found so fascinating about you is, when I first learned about you, you shared that you launched your first book actually in the beginning of the whole pandemic, which was time when the whole world was filled with fear.
Yeah.
And definitely it wasn't the moment to be like, hey, let's launch a book. It was, in the past year, just recently actually, that you decided to quit your job, move to another country, and start a business, 2 businesses actually. So it sounds to me like a lot of situations which, let's say for most people, that would trigger a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And you said that you use fear, you don't push it away, you use it as a fuel. You say that, don't give it too much credit. Can you tell me a little bit more about that moment because you say you're not fearless, or it's not about being fearless. So can you tell me a little bit about that moment when you feel the fear, when you have the idea of, I'm going to move to France as a step in between, but I'm going to move France. I'm going to quit my 9-to-5 job. In that moment, when fear shows up, what do you do with it? How do you treat it? Do you have a ritual, a process for more analytical people like me?
Well, okay, let me try to take a little perspective on how I deal with things. So yes, I do have rituals. I'm a very ritual person. I'm definitely, I guess, a witch, so to speak. And I have my rituals. I have my candles. I have my little altar where I just put some feathers that I found on the ground. And it goes even beyond that. When I say rituals, I mainly mean something to be created in the moment. Sometimes, to me, a ritual could be just going in the swimming pool, taking 3 big leaps or jumps in the water. And at each dive, I will just put the intention of releasing old fears or old skin or old stuff that shouldn't be here, because water can be very cleansing. So, for example, that's something that I could do if I feel something, sort of restraining me, holding me back against my will. I could just, or maybe just have a shower with the intention. I think the intention and awareness is all where everything lie. So it's not just taking the shower, it's having the intention to take the shower and use it as a cleansing moment. Just like those 3 dives, actually 4. I took 4. I dove 4 times, and every time I was like, okay, each dive I'm releasing an old skin. I'm shedding a skin at each dive. And believe it or not, but after that, the pool was less clear and was less appealing. It seemed very sort of greenish, even though it was very blue. And my dad was there, and he saw that. And he was like, what happened to the pool? I was like, sorry, might be me. I don't know. So, it's just, stuff that just naturally come to me. But also sometimes when I'm afraid, I just let it be, I just sort of accept the fear as a wisdom or wise teacher, because when you feel fear, it's an indication that it just triggers something, and it's an opportunity for you to get to know yourself better and deeper. And when you reach that level of self-awareness and self-knowledge and control, I use brackets because it's also about letting go. But once you know yourself really well, people don't have that much power over you, because you have power over yourself. You are your own queen and king. So you just don't hand it to anyone you meet. So that's a huge asset. And fear is a tool to get there. For example, let me see. Last time I felt fear, yeah, I guess, it's like jumping off a bridge, knowing that you have the elastic tied to your waist. Or it's like when you have fear, you have faith that comes with it, if you're ready to see it. Because if I didn't have faith in me, in the universe, in life, I wouldn't start half of what I'm starting. And I can seem crazy from the outside because I'm starting all of these things, and I'm just everywhere and doing a lot of things. So it's just, I think it requires faith in yourself and in the world, because you have to trust that even though you take a leap of faith or that you do something, you will be, you will land safely. And if you don't, then it's not necessarily a punishment. Punishment is the French word, punishment. It's just because there's a lesson to be learned, or that there's a teaching, or maybe you just, sometimes it just happens. I don't want to sound too, like glittery and the world is beautiful and everything. No, shit happens. Trust me, shit happens. But what I mean by that is that to have faith into the fact that it's not the end, when you feel fear and when something is happening in response to that fear, it's not definite, it's not fatal, it's just temporarily. And that's also my focus. So that would be the takeaway for anyone listening right now, is that when you feel fear, be aware that this is not the end of the tunnel, and that this is definitely just a temporarily closed door, and you can open it because you have the key. So it's just being aware that the fear won't last, and it will fade away, and that you have the joystick or the remote to make it go away. It can take longer than you wished. It can definitely, especially at the beginning, if you're not used to, talk to your fear. That's another thing actually people could do, is just to talk to their fear as a character, as an existing entity, because in a way it does exist within you. It's a part of you. Every emotion that you have live within you. You are not your emotions, but they do live within you. So it's like, the way I could share it with the people, I could use a metaphor. I love using metaphors. So you are your own building, and you are renting apartments to each of your emotions. So when one of your emotions just go wild and doesn't, respect you, or put you into harm's way, or anything happens that doesn't feel right or anything, but you own the building, so you are entitled to go to the doorbell, ring it, and just have a chat. It doesn't have to be very mature. Sometimes you can just be very childish about it, because it's okay. Also because children know how to deal with emotions way better than we do. Anyway, that's another story. So yeah, when you feel fear, just go knock on its door and have a chat. Basically.
Well, I love that metaphor, because when you were giving that this description of a building and each of your emotions, renting a building, renting an apartment in that building, and when you said that when one of your emotions, goes a bit crazy, and then the first thought that came to my mind is like, don't go push it back, don't go push it back in one of those apartments. But I like very much what you said. Talk to it, and just have a chat. And I think that sometimes what really our emotions really need from us is to let them be and express themselves, and the message that they have for us. It's like every tenant, maybe there is a leakage in the apartment that they're not happy with, and you can turn your back on them, or you can listen and work together with it. So that's a beautiful metaphor. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's emotions. It's a tricky topic because they can be a friend, they can be a foe, but they're here to talk to us, share something with us of importance. Because when you feel an emotion, there is a message that comes with it automatically. But sometimes you don't understand the message right away. Sometimes it can take a decade before you understand the message of the specific emotion. That's the beauty of it. They are wonderful teachers.
I have a question about something you said earlier, when you were talking about fear, and you said with fear comes faith.
Mm-hmm.
The example you gave is or at least how I see it, was the bungee jump. When you're at the bridge, to trust that you have the harness that will hold you when you jump. And I remember once being at the beach with my husband and daughter, and at the pier there was an equipment, I guess, or a platform where people could do bungee jumping. And while we're sitting at the beach, in the sand, enjoying ourselves, talking, we kept an eye on the people jumping, because it was quite interesting. And you could see every, I'm guessing, 10-15 minutes, someone goes up, jumps, next person. But then there came, I think it was a lady. It was a bit far, so I couldn't see clearly, but I think it was a lady. And it took longer. It took very, very long for her. And at a certain point, the three of us were just sitting there and looking, because we're like, that's taking long, because by now we knew what the process was. So we knew that all she had to do was jump, but she didn't jump. Although she had the harness, although, a lot of people jumped before her, a lot of people jumped after her as well. At the end, I'm not quite sure, but I think at the end what they did was push her. So when you said faith is to trust that you have the harness, somehow that image came to my mind, that even when you have the harness on, it's still, the fear still takes over. But there was something in what you said, with fear comes faith. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? I love that idea that they're together. They're not this or this. It's not fear or faith, but it's together.
Sure. Well, I guess fear comes with faith, especially because fear is an invitation to have faith and put your faith in action. And by faith, I don't mean be irresponsible, take stupid risks or anything. It just means be anchored on your feet and trust that something better is right around the corner, and that you are being taken care of, even though you may not see it because XYZ. It's like, if you go back to the example of that woman, she was definitely, she probably had legit reasons to be scared. And I'm guessing during the jump, maybe she was like very pissed at the guys who pushed her, or maybe she gave them the green light to push her. I don't know. But you see, by facing this fear and experiencing the jump and surviving the fear, that's where the magic happens. Because usually, because we are also, animals, and we have the survival instincts, then fear equals death to us. So faith comes in the middle to change the equation, to help the person facing fear trust and know within herself or himself, or whatever pronouns, that fear doesn't necessarily mean death. Fear means challenge, means you have to question yourself, you have to adapt maybe to a situation, you have to get rid of a comfort zone, and this is where you usually grow. It doesn't mean always be on survival mode and always challenge yourself. You need a break. We are not into the wild anymore. We can release the survival mode. It doesn't have to be on all the time. But I think, it's just changing the equation, because when you have fear, and for you it means death, then of course your entire system will be like, okay, this is dangerous. We will not do this, because if we do this, we're going to die. But usually fear is just projection of a past experience. And it's a definite remnants of, previous stages of evolution. But it doesn't mean it's wrong, because sometimes learning from past experiences and being reminded of them is a good thing, for sure. That's how the teaching happens. But how can I put this? Yeah, usually fear is usually like 3% legit, or actually life-threatening. And the rest is just, projections of past fears or experiences we've experienced. So faith comes there, just like as a friend being like, okay, so, you have this other friend saying that this could happen, but it's coming from a place of fear, so it doesn't mean this is the truth. And then you have, it's like, I guess, having the two little, the demon and the angel of each shoulder. They both have a different speech, but they will be both useful. So I think faith is a permanent state you can have in your life, but it is particularly present, I guess, when you face fear, because fear is an opportunity to meet your faith. Because by facing your fears, you will realize that you can survive it, and that the world or yourself have your own back. And so you can grow further. So for example, when I left Ireland and when I started all of this, or actually, even further than that, when I landed in Ireland, I was supposed to backpack in Ireland. I only have a few €100 in my pocket, no savings. I was fresh out of university. And, I decided to establish myself in Dublin. And on a whim, I was like, I really love this city. I want to settle here. I'm going to make it happen. So, faith, it doesn't mean you have to hand it over entirely to someone else. Faith is just being strongly confident into the fact that you are not alone, and that something will always come towards you to help you. So for me, for example, I spent about 2 months and a half in hostels. It was challenging, and there was some interesting anecdotes that came out of those moments. But I was never alone. I was always surrounded. People always, took care of me in some ways. I always had opportunities to have some space to myself sometimes. And then I eventually found a house, and then I found another house. But, just to allow time to show you that your fear won't necessarily kill you, and that there are people or circumstances or a bigger picture that you don't see, and it's taking care of you. And you can be an adult, make your choices, put them in action, and just have faith that it doesn't mean the first random thing that pops into your head. But when you really want something and there's a certain amount of risk in it, sometimes you just have to take those risks, because those risks, there's chance, because the risk don't necessarily exist. So I don't know, it's a bit challenging actually for me to talk about faith or fear, because it's something that I do quite naturally. So I wouldn't always analyze exactly everything that's going on, and I would just let it be. So I hope I gave some answers to anyone listening. I hope I wasn't too blurry, or that I didn't go too much into like a ramble. But here's my 2 cents. Hopefully, I do talk about fear in my book. So if you want further information, I do. I talk about fear as a sentinel, or like a watch that, is here to keep watch. But sometimes you have to just, remind yourself that it's a keeper, it's a guardian. But it's not the king, it's not the queen, it's not in control. it obeys you. It's here to keep watch. It is useful. We need it, but it's not overpowerful. It's not, a freaking dictator.
Thank you. It does make a lot of sense, and I hope I didn't push you too much, because I do love this thing of picking at people's brains when I see something that they're so good at that it feels natural to them. And I love picking at their brains because I believe that you can learn anything. And
Definitely.
when I have conversations with my clients, but also with friends, family, there is often the fear that comes up, like, I really want this, but usually it's money or time, or not having enough education. Those are usually the top 3 reasons that I hear from people. And with your story, time, you're super busy, from all the things you have going on right now, you're super busy, and yet you're doing it. Money, quitting your 9-to-5 job to move to France, education, like you said, this is your first jewelry line that you're designing. You've never done it before, and I do hear in you that you have that faith. And for me, like I said, it was super interesting to hear that it's not fear or faith, but together. So I'm definitely going to take that with me after our conversation. Something else that you mentioned, that was before this conversation, in a different conversation I had with you, and you also hinted a lot at it now, but I want to say it very clearly because for me it stood out, and that was that you believe that there is a link between everything.
I do.
Which for me also helps. I'm guessing at least that it helps with having faith, to know that you're at a certain place, and it doesn't end here, that something else follows. Can you tell me a little bit more about the connection you see in everything?
Yeah, and that's actually a very good point. I totally agree with you that seeing the link in everything, seeing the web, just helps you feel less alone, and it helps you feel connected. And that's where faith happens as well. And usually fear happens when you feel alone. So when you have faith, automatically there's a connection to everything that happens, and bypasses fear. Yes. So I see connections everywhere. That's a definite superpower of mine. Maybe a bit too much connections. Even sometimes my friends are like, God, you would see a connection between a ladybug flapping its wing and a blue moon you saw somewhere or something. Or, for example, last weekend I was in south of France, in Narbonne. And one night on Saturday night, there was a red moon. Like literally, it was the reddest moon I've ever seen. It was so red, so burning red. I was like, what is happening? And again, people could see this as a bad sign or a warning, or I don't know, anything. But then, course of event happened, and I tied it up to the moon, because to me, seeing connections everywhere means sort of acting like an antenna and receptionates some signals, some signs, some hidden, messages that are not so hidden. It's just, having the right glasses to see them. It's all about the vision. Whether it's this vision, or this vision. So I'm just looking at nature in front of me. So that's why sometimes I just look up. Seeing the link in everything, I'm trying to find some concrete examples to give to our listeners. For example, if I go back to the jewels, for example, it will be an obvious example, but this way will probably serve as a good example. So my logo initiates back to a tattoo that I have. And I did this tattoo because I was with a boy at the time, and he was supposed to come with me to Ireland, and we had a tattoo planned together, separate type of tattoos, but we were supposed to have the same session at the same time, give or take, or the same week. And we broke off, and then I was like, yeah, but I still want to have that session, but I don't want the same tattoo I used to want. So I was like, what am I going to do? And I was with a friend of mine at the time, and she was like, okay, so what do you what do you like? Just, you know, give me words, you know. And we were brainstorming for literally just 5 minutes. And she came out with this beautiful open book, and from it grows a lotus flower. And you're like, what? And it was beautiful when I saw that. And she just drew this on a little piece of, you know, kitchen towel, paper kitchen towel or something. And I took it to the tattoo artist, and now I have it on my right ankle. And then later on, it became my logo for my business. And it's about linking the events. For example, how I ended up with this jewel around my neck right now. It's because at some point I broke up with a guy, and I was with this friend, and I met this friend because I met another friend back in the university, and I met that friend because one day I decided to ditch school, and then I had to catch up on the courses. So I just randomly connected with her. I was like, it was just the beginning of the year. And I was like, hey, excuse me, I didn't go to this class. Can you fill me in? And then we just, you know, got along so well. She's still my friend today, 8 years later. And I met this friend that did my tattoo through a friend that we both met in university. And the girl who made my tattoo was this other friend's housemate. And I met her at a birthday party. And then I didn't see her for like a month. And then we saw each other again and we connected. And then she's still my friend today as well. So, you know, it's about seeing how everything just ties up together and just lead you toward the same thing. Everything is sort of, you know, converging into a same path, I guess. And I could even go further than that by saying that the reason I was ditching school was because the past year, the year before that, it was a hard year because there was so many changes. I'd lost my grandmother. I've reconnected with my dad's family, and there was a lot of new things happening. And that was 10 years ago. Don't know why. Don't have a watch. Don't know why I did that. But it's just to see the beauty and the poetry into what happens to you, because this is the link. The link, I think, to me, if I could state this clearly, the link lies in the poetry that you apply to your life, or the way you see your life, and that's it. So basically, to me, there's poetry in the fact that I broke up with this guy, and then I ended up having this tattoo that became my logo, and then became a jewel, the first jewel I ever designed in my life, and then now took me on a whole new journey. So you see, it's like when you watch a movie, for example, and they go back in time and they say, okay, so you see how this is linked to everything and everything. But that's how I see things, I guess. And I can see which events landed me here, which events helped me become who I am now. And I can see, for example, if I can give a last one, maybe that could be of use. It's just seeing the invisible, seeing what's beneath the surface and have a new take on things, you know, being aware that there's more to it that meets the eye. And for example, that's something that could be useful, I guess. When you, or not sure that's the right one. Give me a minute. Seeing the link and everything. Again, it's a default setting that I have. So it's literally in my name. My name, if you just hear it, can mean links or unlinks everything, but actually it's about links. So anyway, so I don't know, maybe if you have questions, maybe I could be more precise, or I don't know if I'm being too vague.
Well, it's not necessarily a question, but as you were talking about connection, for instance, the story the connection between the event in your life that led to that beautiful piece of jewelry hanging on your neck. It reminded me a lot of that book, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho,
Yes.
which we briefly talked with you about before this conversation. And again, that's big part of the book where the boy, and I love this book, by the way, it's a beautiful
Same.
book. It's, you know, you see something and it's like a sign, but you have to see the sign, and to see the sign, you don't really see it with your eyes. You trust that inner voice, which again connects to everything we talked about. Like, you can trust your intuition or inner voice or whatever you want to call it only when you have faith. Even in the presence of fear, when you have faith. And this reminds me of something else that you mentioned before, that you help people reconnect with their poetry, which is also a connection link. So you also mentioned poetry in your life, for instance, that you see poetry in breaking up with that boy, something which most people don't see poetry in. There's like, oh, he did that to me, or he was this, he was that, or like, oh, everything but poetry. So what do you mean by poetry, and how can breaking up with someone or an event that doesn't really look like poetic event can be poetry? It's a lot of questions.
I'll do my best. I love questions. I'm a literary major, so I like to, have a few arguments or two, talk it out. So poetry, to me, my definition of poetry, it's very close to magic and alchemy. It's like a powerful tool to be happy. It's like a tool for happiness to me, poetry. I know a lot of poets in the past, were tortured soul. Countless poets were very tortured. But my take on poetry is more sweet and light and like a guardian angel. It's not necessarily something dark and heavy and philosophical. Well, a little bit philosophical, but it won't be a poetry that takes you down. My poetry is a poetry that lifts you up. And this is actually what I'm saying in my book, in Kateb, Poetic Pilgrimage, is that poetry is everywhere, just like magic is everywhere, just like the links are everywhere. And the poetry is everywhere. Why? Because if you see the good, or if you see the good in what happens to you and the bad, that's where the poetry happens. Poetry doesn't necessarily mean have pink glasses on, and again, I'm never condoning going from an extreme to another. It's just about having both, and both active and balanced within you. And poetry is like, because you see, if I wasn't linking and being aware of all the tiny things that led me here or gave me a gift, I wouldn't see the poetry, And it's by seeing what events led to what and what it gave me, that's where the poetry happens. So I guess poetry is linked to what you receive, but you receive what you are allowing yourself to give as well. So I explain myself. Poetry, giving and receiving, it's a good marriage. It's a good wedding because and it's very alchemical as well, because you need you need always the opposites. That's what alchemy also is to me. It's just a gymnastic between opposites to serve your better good, the greater good of yourself and the others around you. So to go back to the point, because I tend to digress quite a lot, I'm sorry about that. Poetry is seeing the beauty in what's happening to you, and it's experiencing life with joy as much as you can. Not forced. Don't force joy. There's no point. If you want to feel sad, feel sad. If you want to feel angry. For example, I was talking with my dad the other day, and he was having a bad day. He was seeing everything so dark, and I was like, yeah, but I don't have my job right now. I don't have much to do because all of my gear for astronomy is stuck in Morocco, and I can't do anything here. And he was just, in this sort of, one of those days where you see everything black. And I was like, yeah, but if I present my situation to someone, there's one of two ways I can present it. I can be, okay, so I don't have a job right now. I don't have any income right now just yet. I had to go back to my parents, living to my dad's. I don't have a car. I don't have a driving license. I'm single. I could turn this into a very bad situation. I could be, okay, so you know what? I don't have a job, no money coming in. I do everything by myself. But again, that's not how I see it. To me, it's poetic because I sacrifice with my heart something that I love to make space for something that I love even further. And by doing this, life just gave me a freaking red carpet, and I'm meeting the perfect person, so I'm never alone. That's also part of poetry, I think, in my opinion. It's not feeling alone. I guess I'm coming back to this, I guess. I'm noticing now. It's just, it's all coming together. So if you go back to all the topics we were talking about earlier, you have faith, links, and poetry. And to me, this triangle is kind of the Holy Trinity, because those are the tools or the glasses that I use to, keep my head above the water, because so many things happened that could have sunk me down. And sometimes my head was below the water, as it happens to all of us. And the poetry is here because there's something more that comes out of it, of what happens. I see poetry in the fact that, for example, I never knew my grandfathers. Because I never knew my grandfathers, now I'm also writing a book about them, and because I never met them, it's creating some discussions and talks that I never would have had. It's also, it's about seeing the opportunity, seeing what's been given to you instead of what's been taken away. And I think this is what poetry is to me. It's seeing the presence in life, the gifts that are on the way, and they are beautiful. And it's, for example, I'm trying to find even, even more concrete examples, because I feel like I'm not being concrete enough. Let me see.
Oh, you're doing great. I mean, I think that those are things that you cannot really give concrete examples. I think those are one of those things where one and one doesn't make two. It makes 3, 4, 2 million. It's not. I don't think that you can really put it in concrete examples, but I think
it's something that you feel.
Yeah. I think you gave beautiful examples, and I'm really grateful for that. We're having beautiful conversation, and I have so many more questions for you, and there is time. So I think my last question for today for you would be, where can we find you? Where can we find that beautiful necklace that I've been eyeing on your neck? Where can we order the revised books? Where can we find you?
Okay, so for now, it's all on my website. Everything is sort of in the works, because I might be creating a new website. But for now, you can find me still, if you are on Instagram, you can find me on Instagram at Adélie Williams. If you're French, you can find me at L'Authentique, LAUTENQ, with a lower dash, because I have 2 Instagram accounts. Again, this could change. Maybe I'll merge them into one. I have to rethink my social media approach, as you may have guessed. But you can find everything on my website, which is www.l'authentique, again, LAUTENTIQ. It's supposed to be easy, .com. So I'll send you
Not
the
if you're speaking English.
Not if you're speaking English.
I will put it on in the description of this episode, so it would be easy for the listeners to find it.
So for now, it's all on my website, l'authentique.com. It's a kind of an easy spelling, though, because if I were to spell l'authentique in French, it would be a very long word with complicated placements for letters for people who are not French speakers. So l'authentique, the way it's spelled on my website, it's a simpler version of this French word. So you can find everything on it. It will be the jewel will be available for pre-order next week. And the second edition of Katebs, there's 2, so I usually say it in plural, Katebs, will be available again normally next week, because I've ordered the proofs, as I was saying in the markup. So if everything is in order, if everything is the way I like, it would be ready to order. And actually, for those books, you can find them on Amazon as well.
So probably they will be already available when this episode is available for listen. So I hope people will check out your website, will check out the books, will check out that beautiful necklace there.
Yes.
Thank you for being on Hail the Queen. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your journey, your beautiful presence and smile with us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here, and anytime, I'll come back anytime. I love those type of exchanges, and I love this platform. I love what you're doing with Hail the Queen. I love the name, just the name of the podcast, Hail the Queen. Yes. So yeah, anytime, I would happily come back.
Hi again, it's me, Raina, the host, your host. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to visit our website, hailthequeen.me/podcast. That would take you straight to the podcast page on my website. And there you will find more episodes, you'll find our story. You'll find also my tips about how to make the most out of this episode, how to get the most out of it. And not just out of this episode or Hail the Queen, but any podcast episode you have or will listen to. And before you go, I would like to ask you for a favor. Please support Hail the Queen. And here are a couple of ways you can do that. One, of course, share Hail the Queen with friends, family, people you come across that you think Hail the Queen might be of help to them. If you're listening on iTunes, please make sure to leave us a review. That helps tremendously. Another way to support Hail the Queen is by subscribing or following Hail the Queen on your favorite podcast provider. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your support. And until next time.